What to do when your children no longer respect you. 6 powerful ways to reclaim your position. Welcome to the path to self-realization, a place where we share valuable insights to help you rediscover yourself, live a more meaningful life, and build healthier relationships. If this is your first time visiting our channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on profound content designed to enhance your quality of life. There comes a point in life when the roles between parents and children begin to shift. You have spent decades raising them, guiding them, and sacrificing for them, but one day, you realize that things are no longer the same. Maybe they no longer listen to your advice, dismiss your opinions, or even speak to you in a disrespectful manner. Worse yet, they may make you feel like a burden, and that is truly painful. If your children have started treating you with less respect than you deserve, you might feel disappointed or even angry. You may feel the urge to remind them of everything you have done for them, of the years you have sacrificed. But the truth is, anger will not solve the problem. In fact, it may only make things worse. Instead, there is a far more effective way to regain their respect, one that does not involve arguments or resentment. Today, we will share 6 strategies that can help shift the way your children perceive you. These changes may surprise you, but if you remain patient and consistent, you will reclaim your rightful place as a respected figure in your family. Remember, respect is not something you can demand, it is something you inspire in others. If you find these insights valuable, don't forget to follow our channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment so we can continue providing meaningful content to help you build a fulfilling life. Respect is not given, it is earned through self-worth. Respect is not something you can ask for, nor can it be bought through sacrifice or money. It is a direct reflection of how you perceive yourself, the boundaries you set, and the way you shape your relationships with your children. You do not need your children to love or respect you out of obligation. What you need is to live a life of value, where your presence is inherently worthy of respect. Do not sacrifice your independence just to gain superficial attention. Do not give away everything you have and expect gratitude in return. Respect does not come from what you give, it comes from how you uphold your dignity. Live with self-respect, establish clear boundaries, and never allow anyone, including your own children, to diminish your worth. When you lead a rich and independent life, your children will no longer take you for granted. They will come to see that you are not just their parent, but a person of true value, deserving of respect. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. The path to self-realization is here to walk alongside you as you rediscover your self-worth and build a life of meaning. If you found this message helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts. We look forward to hearing from you. Let's explore 6 key perspectives on this issue. 1. Stop seeking your children's approval, reclaim your own value. In today's modern society, many parents make the mistake of constantly trying to please their children in hopes of earning their respect and love. They are willing to change their opinions, compromise in every situation, and prioritize their children's needs above all else. But the paradox is this: the more you seek approval, the more you risk being taken for granted. The ancient sages once said, "When you need something too much, you become controlled by it." This applies even in parent-child relationships. When you desperately crave respect from your children, you unknowingly give them the power to manipulate and undervalue you. Respect is not something you can beg for, it must be built through dignity and the way you conduct yourself. Why seeking your children's approval can diminish your own worth. 1. You become predictable and easily controlled. When your children realize that you are willing to do anything for their validation, they start seeing it as an expectation rather than a privilege. Gratitude fades, and so does respect. 2. You lose personal boundaries. When you fear losing your children's affection, you may tolerate disrespect, financial manipulation, or a lack of personal autonomy in order to maintain their approval. 3. You teach your children the wrong lesson about value. If they see you constantly yielding, compromising, and sacrificing your own opinions to please them, they learn that power belongs to the one who dominates, not to the one who carries self-respect. A real-life story, when a father rediscovered his self-worth. Robert, a father in his 60s, was once a successful businessman, but in his later years, he dedicated all his time to serving his children. He was always available, rearranging his schedule for them, sacrificing his personal time, and even tolerating disrespect just to maintain harmony. He believed that by being endlessly patient, his children would appreciate and respect him more. But reality was different. Instead of earning their love and respect, Robert realized that his children had started seeing him as merely a convenience, always there to help, yet unworthy of serious attention. They stopped consulting him on major decisions, disregarded his feelings, and no longer saw him as a figure of authority. Why? Because he had unintentionally taught them that his opinions and emotions were less important than their needs. One day, Robert made a decision: he would change. He began setting boundaries, declining unreasonable demands, and focusing on his own interests. Initially, his children reacted negatively, complaining that he had become selfish. But over time, something remarkable happened. They began to see him differently, not as a passive, self-sacrificing father, but as a strong, self-assured individual. How to reclaim your own value. 1. Stop seeking your children's approval. You do not need to please them in order to be loved. Let affection develop naturally, not through constant self-sacrifice. 2. Learn to say no without guilt. When your children make unreasonable requests, decline them firmly but respectfully. 3. Define your personal values. Establish your own principles and stand by them, regardless of external opinions. 4. Invest in yourself. Pursue hobbies, build meaningful connections, and focus on self-growth. Respect does not come from trying to please others, it comes from how you perceive yourself. When you truly honor your own worth, the world around you, including your children, will have no choice but to acknowledge it. 2. Don't argue. Be the living example of true respect. The ancient sages said, "A noble person does not argue, they act." When children begin to disregard or disrespect their parents, many parents instinctively react by arguing, reminding them of past sacrifices, or demanding a change in their attitude. But the truth is, respect cannot be won through arguments. It only comes when you genuinely embody dignity and self-worth. Think about it. When someone loudly demands respect, does that make them more respectable? Or does it only provoke resistance and indifference? The harder someone tries to prove they deserve respect, the easier it becomes to ignore them. Respect comes from presence, not words. Consider the story of Mr. Martin, a once highly respected teacher in his community. In his younger years, he was admired for his wisdom and guidance. But as he aged, he felt that his children no longer valued his opinions. Frustrated, he began debating with them about morality, responsibility, and the sacrifices he had made to raise them. However, instead of changing their behavior, his children grew more distant. They found his words exhausting and saw his attempts to command respect as nothing more than a demand rather than something naturally earned. One day, Mr. Martin decided to stop arguing. He no longer tried to force his children to listen or acknowledge his contributions. Instead, he focused on living in alignment with his values. He spent his time reading, writing, engaging in community activities, and becoming a person truly worth respecting. Over time, his children began to notice the difference. They no longer saw him as an aging father clinging to authority, but as a wise and independent man, worthy of admiration. It was his quiet strength and self-assurance that reshaped the way they viewed him, not his words, but his actions. How to be a role model for respect. Control your emotions. When faced with disrespect, do not react with anger or frustration. Stay calm, because true strength is shown by those who are not controlled by emotions. Refine your demeanor. Speak less, act more. Be a person of principle, wisdom, and quiet confidence. Transform yourself. Instead of reminding your children why they should respect you, live a life that naturally earns their admiration. Let your children discover your value. Do not force respect. Allow them to recognize it on their own through the way you conduct yourself daily. True respect cannot be demanded, it must be inspired. Respect is not something you can demand through words. It is something you inspire in others through the way you live. When you become a person of real value, respect will come naturally, without the need to ask for it. 3. Don't rely on your children for emotional fulfillment. Rediscover your own worth. The ancient sages taught, when your child is young, love them with your heart. When they grow up, love them with your wisdom. The love parents give to their children is unconditional. But when that love turns into dependence, it becomes a burden, not just for parents but also for the children themselves. Humans have a natural tendency to take for granted what is always available. When children are young, they need their parents for every step of their journey. But as they grow up, they become consumed by their own responsibilities, their careers, families, and personal pursuits. If parents continue to seek love, attention, and validation from their children to feel happy, they place themselves in a vulnerable position, one that often leads to disappointment. The story of Margaret, a mother who found herself again. Margaret was a devoted mother who had spent her entire life caring for her children. When they grew up and moved out, she felt a deep emptiness. She began waiting for their phone calls, their visits, their reassurances of love. When they became too busy to visit regularly, she felt abandoned, saddened, and even resentful. But one day, she had a realization: her suffering did not come from her children. It came from her own emotional dependence on them. From that moment on, she changed her outlook on life. She rediscovered her passions, joined clubs, learned a new language, and built new friendships. Then, something remarkable happened. When she stopped seeking validation from her children, they started reaching out to her more often. Why? Because when someone lives a fulfilling and dignified life, others are naturally drawn to them. The sages once said, "When the mind is at peace, the world around you follows." A person who can live contentedly, without relying on anyone else for emotional satisfaction, is truly free. Someone who knows how to be alone is not lonely, but rather a person capable of creating happiness from within. When you stop depending on your children to feel valued, you will realize that your worth has always existed within you. Instead of waiting for attention, build a meaningful life that makes your children happy to return home to you. When you live with independence and self-respect, your children will come to you not out of obligation, but because they genuinely want to. Remember, love cannot be demanded, it must be radiated. Respect does not come from pleading, it comes from how fully and authentically you live. 4. Set and maintain boundaries, redefining how your children perceive you. The ancient sages said, "Water that is too clear has no fish. A person who is too lenient has no authority." In any relationship, especially between parents and children, boundaries are the foundation of respect. When parents fail to set clear limits, they risk being overlooked, taken for granted, or even exploited. Why are boundaries so important? Human nature is inherently driven by desire, anger, and ignorance, greed, aversion, and delusion. When people have unlimited access to benefits without restrictions, they tend to overstep boundaries. In a family setting, if parents continuously endure, sacrifice, and tolerate imbalances without maintaining personal limits, children may unconsciously take these sacrifices for granted. This does not mean children are bad, it is simply human nature. When a behavior is repeatedly accepted without consequence, it becomes a habit. If a parent consistently allows their child to speak to them disrespectfully without addressing it, the child will naturally assume it is acceptable. If a parent provides unlimited financial support without clear conditions, children may become overly dependent and fail to appreciate the assistance. The story of Richard, a father who reclaimed his authority. Richard, a once successful businessman, devoted his later years to providing financial and emotional support to his children. He adjusted his life to fit their needs, always offering assistance whenever they asked. At first, his children were grateful, but over time, they began to see his generosity as an obligation rather than a choice. They no longer viewed him as a person with his own life, but rather as a resource that was always available. Realizing this, Richard made a decision. He set boundaries. He stopped providing unlimited financial assistance and made it clear that his children needed to take responsibility for their own lives. At first, they reacted negatively, complaining that he had changed. But as time passed, something shifted. They began to respect him more. Why? Because he was no longer just a father who gave without limits, he was a man with principles. A person of value, and someone truly deserving of respect. How to set boundaries effectively. Say no when necessary. If a request does not align with your well-being or values, decline it confidently, without guilt. Define what you will and will not accept. For example, You may choose to help your children financially within reasonable limits. But you are not an unlimited source of support. Do not let emotions dictate your decisions. Do not compromise on your principles just to avoid conflict or fear that your children will be upset. Be firm, but not rigid. Make it clear that boundaries do not mean a lack of love. Instead, they create a healthy foundation for mutual respect. Boundaries build respect, not distance. Setting boundaries is not about creating separation, it is about establishing a solid foundation for respect. When you have clear principles and enforce them with consistency, your children will not only respect you more, but they will also learn how to treat others with integrity and fairness. 5. Stop giving kindness if it's not appreciated. Turn your generosity into value, not obligation. There is a paradox in life. The more you give without boundaries, the less people appreciate what they receive. This is especially true in the parent-child relationship, when kindness has no limits. It can easily be seen as an obligation rather than a precious gift. It is natural for parents to love their children. But when sacrifice becomes an expectation, gratitude begins to fade. The ancient sages said, "Being too kind invites exploitation. Being too humble leads to being overlooked." If a person continuously offers help without requiring appreciation or recognition, they unknowingly diminish their own value. The story of Helen, a mother who gave too much. Helen was a devoted mother who had spent her life caring for her children. She offered financial support whenever they struggled, helped raise their children, and made endless sacrifices to make their lives easier. But instead of receiving respect and gratitude, she gradually became an afterthought in their lives. One day, she refused to help because of her health condition, expecting some understanding from her children. However, instead of empathy, she was met with complaints and accusations of being selfish. That was when Helen realized she had unknowingly taught her children to see her kindness as a duty rather than a choice. How to turn kindness into value instead of obligation. Only help when it is truly necessary and deserved. Do not give simply out of obligation. Help only when it genuinely adds value. Set clear boundaries. Generosity should have limits. You do not need to sacrifice everything just to receive attention in return. Teach your children that all help is a privilege, not a given. If they do not learn this lesson, your support will not benefit them, it will only make them dependent. Respect yourself first. If you always put yourself second, do not be surprised when others do the same. Kindness is a strength, but only when used wisely. Remember, you do not have to please everyone to be loved. Let your kindness be a gift of value, not a duty to be taken for granted. When you respect your own generosity, others will respect it too. 6. Money and inheritance. Keeping your assets also means keeping respect. Money is not just a medium of exchange, it is a tool of power in relationships. Especially within families, many parents believe that by giving away their entire wealth to their children, they will receive love and care in return. But society has shown a harsh truth. When parents give everything away, they risk becoming irrelevant, losing their value in the eyes of their own children. The painful reality of giving too much. There are countless heartbreaking stories of parents who gave away all their savings, homes, and assets to support their children. At first, they believed this would provide a better life for them and ease their financial burdens. But once they had nothing left, their children began to distance themselves, even becoming indifferent. Some elderly parents found themselves pushed aside, living in isolation, receiving none of the care they had hoped for. Why does this happen? Because money is not just an asset, it is a symbol of independence and control. Take the story of Eleanor, a woman who spent her entire life saving to ensure a bright future for her children. When she grew older, she divided all her wealth among them, believing this would strengthen their bond. But the result was the opposite. Once they received everything, they visited less, their concern faded, and she realized she had lost not only her financial security but also her status in the family. The lesson: keep your wealth, not out of greed, but for your own well-being. Holding onto your assets does not mean being selfish, it means protecting your dignity and value. When you maintain financial control, your children will continue to respect you. When you sustain economic independence, you not only safeguard your old age but also maintain balance in your relationship with your children. This does not mean you should never help your children, but that you must be mindful and set limits. Give when necessary, but never give everything away. Keep a portion of your wealth to ensure your own self-sufficiency and independence. Do not let love turn into blind sacrifice, only to find yourself the one who suffers most in the end. The hidden danger of unconditional financial support. One of the most overlooked but critical aspects of parent-child relationships is money and inheritance. Many parents believe that leaving behind financial wealth or assets will strengthen family bonds. But the truth is, money does not buy respect. If not handled correctly, it can distort relationships entirely. In many families, parents want to protect their children from financial struggles, so they continue supporting them even after they are fully grown. But here's the paradox: when support becomes expected, it is no longer appreciated. Children start to see parental help as an obligation rather than a privilege. In some cases, constant financial assistance can even weaken their sense of responsibility, making them dependent and dismissive of their parents' efforts. Take Thomas, a once successful businessman. As he aged, he wanted to ensure that his children never faced financial hardship. He paid off their debts, bought them homes, and gave them financial support. But instead of gratitude, his children began to see it as their right. They demanded more, appreciated less, and even argued over their inheritance while he was still alive. Only when Thomas stopped his unconditional financial support and required his children to take responsibility for their own lives did he begin to regain their respect. The key takeaway: teach your children the value of hard work and self-sufficiency. If you want your children to respect you, teach them to appreciate effort and labor. Do not let your wealth become a chain of emotional manipulation or a source of family conflict. Plan your assets wisely. Be transparent about your financial decisions, but never let money be the sole foundation of your family connections. Respect cannot be bought with money. If your children only treat you well because of financial gain, that is not real respect. True respect comes when you uphold your self-worth, demand responsibility, and ensure that your wealth does not become a source of greed and division. Respect is not something you can demand. It is something you inspire in others by how you live. Subscribe to the Path to Self-Realization to continue your journey of self-discovery and personal growth.